up your engine! Today, I'm going to rate Asian cars that are sold in the United States from worst to best. Now, I've been fixing cars for 53 years. I can only talk about my experience. So I'm not talking about Asian cars that are sold in other parts of the world, just ones that were either sold here and no longer are, or are continually being sold here. Now, number 8 on the list, we're starting from the worst to the best, is Suzuki. Suzuki's an interesting company. I had a 750 Suzuki motorcycle. It was a screamer. Went 175 miles an hour. Always started, didn't leak oil. But their cars, not so much. In the United States, Suzuki cars were a massive failure. They were cheap little piles of junk that fell apart, and since Suzuki wasn't really a big car manufacturer in the United States, you couldn't get parts for them, people didn't know how to work on them, but mainly, they were underpowered garbage, especially with automatic transmissions. Now, when you realize 90-something% of Americans now drive automatic transmissions, that pretty much finished it off for Suzuki. Couldn't get out of their own way, broke, made noise. Were rolling piles of crap for the American market, and they pulled out. Now, some people like those little Suzuki Samurai, Jeepy type things. They were a niche market. I still remember one of my early customers who bought one. He loved the thing. And then he said, oh, I'm going to take a trip to visit my brother in Florida from Texas. When he came back, he said, I'm getting rid of that piece of junk. It rode like a washing machine on the highway. They certainly aren't highway traveling vehicles. They were fun little runabout Jeepy things. A certain amount of people want them. Pretty much in the United States, Suzuki was a massive failure. They don't sell them anymore here. Probably a good thing. Now, as you're going to find if you watch this whole video, Asians don't necessarily build great cars. Some do, some don't. Some people get the myth, all these are good, all these are bad. No, you have to go case by case. Speaking of a bad case, coming in on number 7 of one of the worst Asian cars in the United States is, no surprise, Nissan. Now, I could make a day-long video about Datsun, the original company, made excellent little cars and great sports cars. They were the first ones to make reliable sports cars that were zippy, fun, didn't leak oil, started all the time. But for some reason, they decided to change the name to Nissan. And then around 2000, the French company Renault took over, and the quality, which was already starting to decline, took a steep nosedive. And Nissans, from the mid-2000s up, I see blown head gaskets all the time in the engines. Automatic transmission failures. Nissan owns the Jatco transmission company, and they make some of the crappiest transmissions in the world. Now, other companies have bought them in the past. But if you look at it now, a lot of these companies are switching over to the Aisin Japanese transmissions, which is the company that Toyota owns. I worked on a Volvo the other day. It had an Aisin Toyota transmission in it. You see some of the Chrysler products, they're starting to buy Aisin transmissions because they had so many problems with their own. Jatco makes crappy transmissions. Crappy transmissions and crappy Nissan cars. It goes hand in hand. And it's such a shame because I'm used to make really good cars. But the Nissan company has been drifting down for a long time. Decades ago, Ford was talking about buying it, but then Ford stock went down, so they couldn't buy anybody. Renault buys them, the French company, which is pretty much on the verge of bankruptcy today too. Nissans just aren't the vehicles they used to be. They used to make great cars and really good sports cars. Not any longer. Their quality is dropping down, and now they're even talking about their fancy versions, which are the Infinities, calling them Nissan Pluses instead. You can change the name, but if you don't fix the quality, they're still crap and smart people won't buy them. Such a shame to see a company like Datsun that made great little cars that could go 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 miles regularly. But that was way back in the 1970s. No longer. They're not worth the money you pay for them, and as they age, they generally become endless money pits. And sometimes as little as 60,000, 70,000 miles, they start falling apart. And if you noticed, I grouped Infiniti with Nissan. And that's what I'm doing in this video. Nissan also makes Infinities. Toyota makes Lexus. They're the fancy ones. I'm putting them all together. And Honda makes Acura. So when I talk about those companies, I'm including Honda and Acura as one, Nissan Infiniti as one, and Toyota Lexus as one company. It is the same company. It's just branded them. And the Kia Hyundai stuff, the Genesis, they branched off, but I include them because it's the same company. They're just trying to fool people with names. Just like they used to make Dodge Rams. Now they're called just Rams because everybody knows Dodge and Chrysler have such a horrible reputation. They just decided to call it Rams instead. They didn't change how they built them. They just changed the name. Now, number 6 on the list of worst to best Asian cars. Number 6 is Mitsubishi. Now, Mitsubishi is part of a huge Japanese corporation, and cars are but a small bit of their business. More of a sideline than anything else. They've been trying to sell cars in the United States for quite some time. Long time ago, they had a deal with Chrysler, a bunch of these cheap little Chrysler cars. The problem with Mitsubishi is quality isn't the greatest. When I was a younger mechanic, Mitsubishis for some reason made horrible piston rings. They'd burn oil as they aged. I remember a customer of mine that had a Mitsubishi Diamante, and then they drove down the road, smoke would just pile up. And it got to the point that they had to put a quart of oil in about every 80 to 100 miles on that piece of junk. And it was because they used cheap piston rings, and they seem to continue to be doing that. The quality of them just isn't there. And in an ultra competitive world today, if you have a vehicle with lower quality, it rattles a lot, makes noise, burns oil, transmissions have problems, you're not going to be able to sell that to that many people, because people generally will learn their neighbor had a mistake and bought one, or they bought one, or their son or daughter or whoever bought one. They had problems, they're going to say, nah, those people had problems with it. Now, if they would have put more quality and engineering into them, hey, it's a Japanese company. People are always asking for Japanese cars, thinking Japan, quality. But it's not always the case. In the case of the Mitsubishis, it just isn't there. And yeah, they made cheaper cars, and I'd had some customers, hey, they'd get 150,000 miles out of them, but often then they'd have to replace the engine or the transmission. They'd gamble and they'd put in a used engine from a junkyard or a used transmission from a junkyard. One guy, he went through 3 transmissions in 5 years. Not the greatest quality. There's better stuff out there. So my advice, don't waste your money on a Mitsubishi. Now, next on the list is number 5. They are starting to get quite a bit better. Subaru. Now, Subaru, they don't make all that many vehicles. It's another Japanese mega corporation. But Subaru was a company that really revolutionized making almost all of their vehicles all-wheel drive. A lot of people up north, people that go skiing, people that live in muddy areas, they like that, and they'll buy a Subaru. The problem with Subaru was they have those boxer engines that are outdated engines. And to get more horsepower of them, they soup them up, and then they blow up. They're notorious for blowing head gaskets and burning out automatic transmissions. Now, Subaru builds all their own transmissions now. They are going up in quality, so they're better than they used to be. Their 6-cylinder boxer engines with 3 cylinders on one side, 3 on the others are notorious for having engine problems. I had a customer the other day, he's got 70,000 miles. The engine's starting to go. You can hear it clacking away. And it's just typical on those things. And this is a guy who doesn't drive it hard and maintains his car religiously. And he said to me, Scotty, that small mileage, why is this thing breaking down? I said, because it's a Subaru. Now, granted, they do have a loyal following of people that like all-wheel drives. And if you baby them, and especially if you get a standard transmission, my neighbor's plumber has 2 of them. He's got 180,000 on each one of them. They're standard transmissions, and they're the 4-cylinder engines, not the 6. So they are getting better, still not the greatest. Now, number 4 on the list of worst to best, getting better, is Hyundai Kia. Yeah, they're separate companies, but they're like octopus tentacles all intertwined. One owns part of one owns part of the other. They share all kinds of technology. And here, I'm including the Genesis because that's just a fancy brand. They are getting much better than they used to be. Used to be relatively crappy runabout vehicles that were pretty cheap and fell apart as they aged. And yes, they've gone a long way since then, especially in the past decade and a half. They still have some problems. A while back, they had a bunch of engine problems. Turns out one of the machines in the American factories had a problem. It was making the engines wrong, and the engines kept blowing up, and they had to rebuild hundreds of thousands of them. And they didn't even do such a hot job rebuilding them. I had a customer, he took his in for the fix. A couple thousand miles later, the engine blew up. They didn't give him another engine. They said it was something else, you know. So you want quality. You don't want something that they put a Band-Aid, fix it, and then it breaks again. Now, of course, they've gone whole hog in with this Genesis. Now it used to be just a car. Now it's a whole brand of cars. And they're making these fancy ones with more quality. But if you watched any of my videos, you'll see that I've analyzed used ones. And I saw that they would have 5 times as much wear inside the engine as an equivalent Lexus or Toyota. They would have 100-something thousand miles in it. Genesis are great vehicles for driving. They're fast, they're fun. but they do not hold up like a Lexus. Now, if you're one of those people that buys a new car every 5 or 6 years, gets rid of them before 100,000 miles, you'll probably be perfectly satisfied with the Genesis because it is their top line car. And going back to Hyundai and Kia, the big advantage was it cost a lot less than Toyotas and Hondas. But today, they're pretty much at a par for the same price. If you're going to pay almost the same price, so you get a Honda or a Toyota. What's the point if you're not saving a whole bunch of money? Now, number 3 on my list of worst to best is Mazda. Lately, Mazda quality has been going way up. Mazda and Toyota now have some deals going together. They're making cars in the same assembly line here in the United States. Their quality is definitely upswinging with Mazda. They're big on the Skyactiv technology, more power, more gas mileage. Originally, they had problems with the stuff because they had a lot of motorcraft parts. And on the cams, those variable valve timing systems were breaking down all the time because they were using these motorcraft systems that broke all the time. That wasn't a smart move. But today, they're more aligned with Toyota. A lot of companies are headed down. They're actually headed up. There's some pretty quality cars out there. And now we're going to number 2, which is Honda. Honda started tiny little 2-cylinder car in the United States with a motorcycle, air-cooled engine and a fan inside it. I remember when I was a young mechanic, one of our customers, my father's corner Texaco gas station. He came out of one, he looked like a Shiner coming out of one of those clown cars. The guy was 6'6", and he came out of this tiny little car. But he loved it because it got good gas mileage. Well, they started with that little motorcycle engine, and they have improved. Honda is a typical classic Japanese car manufacturer. They're into perfecting things. Not just, well, that didn't work, throw it away, try something else. Now, like anybody, people make screw-ups. They got problems with the oil dilution on those 1.5 turbocharged gasoline direct inject engines because they put too much technology without testing it out, and they get oil dilution where gasoline gets in the oil, and of course that will start wearing parts of the engine out faster. And over the course of time, they've had a few problems with their automatic transmissions being somewhat weak, and they fixed that too. Their own engineers designed and built their transmissions. They're not buying these crappy Jatco ones. Now, if you would have asked me 20 years ago, Toyota versus Honda, I would have said it's almost a dead heat. Now, the Honda, they slipped a little bit more than Toyota did. Definitely put Toyota higher than today. But still, being number 2 isn't a bad position to be in. My personal opinion of Honda is they make great small cars. Big cars, not really their forte. Some of their bigger cars had problems. Now, my wife drives a Lexus. I wouldn't buy her an Acura, the fancy Hondas, because the Lexuses are better cars all around. But if you want a small, zippy little car, the small, zippy little Hondas are actually a lot more fun than the small Toyotas, because the Toyotas aren't that zippy. That's not their thing. Their thing is more reliability, long-term use, low maintenance. You never even have to touch the stupid things. This has like 240,000 miles. It's got the shim system, right? It's never been touched. It still runs perfectly fine. You wouldn't get that with a Honda. You would have to do the maintenance of adjusting the valves. That's the one big drawback of Hondas is their valves need adjusting more often. And often I get older Hondas, they don't run right, they don't start good when they're hot. And it's all because the valves aren't adjusted correctly and they have to be adjusted. But a lot of the Hondas, they still have to be manually adjusted. And that's a big maintenance that a lot of people don't do, or it's done wrong and then they have problems. Which makes the Toyota design, even though it costs a lot more to adjust valves, since you hardly ever have to do it, it's a better design. And now we're going to go to number 1, which of course is Toyota. Not the fastest. This old Celica's no race car. It's basically a Toyota Corolla with a different body stuck on it. But they run and run and run, and they look good. Toyota isn't and never has been a sports car company. Look at their recent stuff. They brought back the Toyota Supra. Well, not really. It's a BMW Roadster. And like any company, mistakes are making. They had that big recall for fuel pumps. Well, guess what? Toyota doesn't make the fuel pumps. They get them from Nippon Denso most of the time. And so does Honda. And Honda just had to recall a bunch of their cars because of the Nippon Denso fuel pumps. Plier that screwed them over. It wasn't the company itself. And of course, they got to fix them all for free. It's not like you're going to pay anything for it. They fixed their problems. If you watch that video that I've got about the history of Toyota, in the beginning, they made mistakes. But Mr. Toyota himself made sure that they fixed their problems so that they were known for cars that if there's a problem, they take care of it, they fix it, and then they learn, okay, we're not going to make them like that now. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to make mistakes, but if they stand behind them, and the main thing, if they learn from their mistakes, you're the one who profits from that. They're not going to be like Fiat Chrysler that makes junk, and then they continue to make more junk. And then they think, here's a radical new thing. And what does it do? It doesn't work. because they didn't test it right, or they made it too cheap. Yes, you're going to pay more for quality. Well, not always. You can buy a Mercedes-Benz for $100-something and watch it fall apart when it gets to be 6, 7 years old, or even early. You don't necessarily get your money's worth. But if you do your research, you should get your money's worth. I tell people to buy Toyotas, invariably a bunch of people say, but Scotty, the new ones are so expensive and so are the used ones. Well, guess what? There's a reason they're so expensive, especially the used ones, because they're quality. Take a Jag. Buy yourself a $70,000 Jag when it's 8 years old. You can pick them up for $4,000 or $5,000 most of the time, because everybody knows they're junk. So now you know my pick of the worst to best Asian cars you can buy in the United States. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.